Idaho police released chilling new video of a fatal shooting at an In-N-Out in Twin Falls, Idaho. Take a look here. Fox News putting this on social media, saying new video reveals the deadly path the gunman took through an Idaho In-N-Out before an off-duty state trooper, former law enforcement officer, an armed bystander confronted him, helping drive him away and prevent further casualties. Twin Falls police released the timeline Friday showing how the August 1st attack unfolded. The gunman killed 3 people and wounded 7 others before officers closed in near a canyon. The gunman died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and investigators have not determined a motive.
4 times. According to the newly released police footage, the gunman walked up to the drive-through window 4 separate times. In a matter of minutes, a normal Saturday afternoon in Twin Falls, Idaho, turned into a nightmare. 10 people were shot. 3 lives were lost. But the most shocking detail from today's press conference isn't what the gunman did. It is what an unarmed civilian did to stop him, and it is what law enforcement found when they finally pieced together the timeline of chaos that changed this city forever. This is not just a breaking news update. This is a timeline of survival, and timelines are what we track. You're watching ColdCase Watch Central. We track active cases, we follow the evidence, and we do not look away when ordinary people are forced to do extraordinary things. In today's watch, the Twin Falls mass shooting, the drive-through footage, the off-duty officers, and the man who put his hands in the air. If you're new here, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now let us get into it. To understand the heroism, you first have to understand the speed of the violence. Because the official record shows a timeline so fast it defies comprehension. It should have been a normal Saturday afternoon, August 1st, 2026, 2:29 p.m. That is when Twin Falls Dispatch received the first 911 call reporting an active shooter at the In-N-Out restaurant on Blue Lakes Boulevard North. The Twin Falls In-N-Out had only opened recently. It was part of the chain's massive expansion into Idaho, located 130 miles southeast of Boise. It was supposed to be a symbol of growth, a new hangout spot for the community. Instead, it became the epicenter of a tragedy that nobody saw coming. Before we look at the footage, we need to say their names, because behind every timeline, behind every piece of evidence, there are families whose lives were shattered in seconds. Ashley Garibay, 23 years old, visiting from Stockton, California. Dale Schultz, 66, from Salt Lake City. Christopher Claunch, 59, from right there in Hagerman, Idaho. 3 people who pulled into a parking lot and never went home. 10 people in total were shot, inside the restaurant, directly outside on the pavement, on an adjacent busy road, at a Tesla car charging station in the nearby visitors center lot. The chaos did not stay in one place. It spilled across the entire complex. And the man responsible was Chad Williams, 24 years old. He had briefly attended the College of Southern Idaho. He had previously lived in Arizona. He was local enough to know the area, but disconnected enough to carry out an atrocity. As of tonight, investigators still do not have a motive. They do not know why he chose this location. They do not know why he chose this day. What they do know is that when police finally closed in on him near a nearby canyon, he took his own life. But how did those minutes unfold? What does the video actually show? And, more importantly, who stepped into the line of fire before the police even arrived? The answers are in the footage, and it starts at the drive-through window. When law enforcement released the video on Friday, they didn't just release a piece of evidence. They released a masterclass in human courage under impossible pressure. We are not going to show you the graphic reality of that footage. Out of respect for the victims, and out of respect for the community still reeling from the trauma, we will walk you through the official police timeline. But you need to understand the sheer speed of what happened.
On August 1st, 2026, at 2:29 p.m., Twin Falls Dispatch received a 911 call reporting an active shooter incident at the In-N-Out restaurant located at 1965 Blue Lakes Boulevard North in Twin Falls, Idaho. Twin Falls police officers responded as the primary law enforcement agency alongside Twin Falls Fire, Magic Valley Paramedics, Idaho State Police, Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office, and numerous other area partners. 3 people were killed, and 7 additional victims suffered gunshot wounds. The gunmen died at the scene from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The video you are about to see contains video and audio from an active shooter incident involving multiple fatalities and injured victims. The video has been edited for length and clarity. Portions have been muted, blurred, paused, or omitted to protect privacy and to avoid releasing graphic material. This video contains content that may be disturbing or traumatic for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The gunman arrives at the drive-thru in a white Honda Civic. When he reaches the payment window, the gunman shoots the first victim, Ashley Garibay, who later succumbed to her injuries at the hospital. The gunman proceeds in the drive-thru, parking his car. He then shoots the second victim, Christopher Claunch, in his vehicle, who is pronounced dead at the scene. Former Twin Falls police officer and former Idaho State Police trooper, Austin James, runs towards the incident where he encounters the gunmen and is the third victim shot. Mr. James retreats and draws his handgun, preparing to engage the gunmen. Due to his severe injury and blood loss, he is pulled back into his vehicle and given aid before going to the hospital. The gunman returns to the payment window and observes employees rendering aid to Ashley. He fires into the window a second time before his handgun jams, and he returns to his vehicle to retrieve a rifle. Inside the restaurant, an off-duty Idaho State Police trooper assists in evacuating patrons and employees while he searches for the threat. With the rifle, the gunman runs back to the drive-thru and fires at nearby patrons before returning to the payment window for a third time. The off-duty ISP trooper and the gunman exchange fire. The gunman retreats before returning to the payment window for a fourth time, firing inside and striking the fourth victim, a Good Samaritan who is attempting to assist the off-duty trooper and render aid to the victim inside. The gunman proceeds to the food window. Upon seeing no one inside, he moves on. In the drive-thru, a woman fleeing from inside the restaurant runs alongside the building before encountering the gunmen. She takes cover behind his vehicle and picks up the handgun he left behind. Discovering it is jammed, she discards the pistol as she runs away, and the gunman walks towards Blue Lakes Boulevard North. The gunman fires at multiple vehicles that are stopped at a red light, striking 3 victims. A Good Samaritan with a handgun engages the gunman who is running north towards the Tesla charging station. The gunman shoots the 8th victim in the first Tesla. He then shoots the 3rd deceased victim, Dale Schultz, and his passenger, the 10th victim, in the second Tesla. The gunman proceeds through the parking lot towards the Twin Falls Visitors Center. He is seen by people inside who evacuate the store. The first officer arrives on scene. The off-duty ISP trooper directs him towards the gunmen. Three people in the visitors center are unable to evacuate and shelter inside as the gunman enters. Employees from nearby stores evacuate to the walking trail, believing the gunman is in the front parking lot. The gunman exits the visitors center and proceeds to the trail where he encounters two employees. One bravely engages with the gunman, allowing others coming down the trail time to turn around escape. As they separate, the gunman fires towards the employee. He then runs up the path as officers approach. Officers pursue up the trail searching the pathway, construction site, and canyon edge while receiving reports of a possible second gunman.
Hey, police! Can you hear me? Okay, do you see a man? Where'd he go? That way?
Between the construction site and Petco, an officer locates the gunman off the trail.
Hey! Show me your hands!
As the officer challenges him, the suspect dies of a self-inflicted gunshot wound and falls into the canyon. Officers immediately begin to investigate claims of a second gunman and return to render aid to victims alongside the firefighters, paramedics, and other personnel. The Twin Falls Police Department is certain that additional acts of heroism and rendering aid to those in need contributed to the saving of lives. This remains an active case. Twin Falls police detectives continue to investigate alongside our partners with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office, the Idaho State Police, and many other area, state, and federal agencies.
According to the official police narration, Williams arrived at the drive-thru in a white Honda Civic. When he reached the payment window, he opened fire. The first victim was Ashley Garibay. She was working the window. She later succumbed to her injuries at the hospital. Williams didn't stop. He drove forward through the drive-thru lane, parked his car, and got out. He walked over to a nearby vehicle and fatally shot the second victim, 59-year-old Christopher Claunch, who was just sitting in his car. And this is where the first act of unbelievable bravery happened. Austin James, a former Twin Falls police officer and former Idaho State trooper, was nearby. He heard the shots. He didn't hide. He ran directly toward the incident. He encountered the gunman and was shot. Severely injured, bleeding, James retreated and drew his own handgun, preparing to engage the shooter. But because of his severe blood loss, bystanders pulled him back into a vehicle, giving him aid before rushing him to the hospital. He bought time with his own body. But the gunman wasn't done. He walked back to the payment window. He saw employees inside trying to render aid to Ashley. He fired into the window a second time. And then something went wrong. His handgun jammed. He ran back to his car to retrieve a rifle. Inside the restaurant, an unidentified off-duty Idaho state trooper was already moving. While employees scrambled to escape, this trooper came forward, helping everyone evacuate, searching for the threat. With the rifle in hand, the gunman ran back to the drive-thru, firing at nearby patrons. He returned to the payment window for a third time. The off-duty trooper and the gunman exchanged fire through the glass. The gunman retreated, but he came back a fourth time, firing inside, striking a fourth victim, a good Samaritan who was trying to help the off-duty trooper and render aid to the wounded inside. Think about that. Before the first police cruiser even pulled into the lot, a former cop, an off-duty trooper, and a good Samaritan were already in the line of fire. They disrupted his plan. They slowed him down. But as the gunman moved away from the window, the timeline split. And what happened next reads like a movie. As the gunman proceeded to the food window, he saw no one inside. He started walking out toward Blue Lakes Boulevard North. At the exact same time, a woman who had fled from inside the restaurant was running alongside the building. She ran right into the path of the gunman. She took cover behind his white Honda Civic, and there, on the ground, she saw the handgun he had left behind, the one that had jammed. She picked it up. She realized it was jammed. She discarded the pistol and kept running. She survived by seconds. The gunman walked out into the street. He started firing at traffic stopped at a red light, striking 3 people in their vehicles. But again, he was not met with silence. A good Samaritan in the street, armed with a handgun, engaged the gunman, returning fire as the killer ran north toward the Tesla charging station. The gunman reached the charging station. He shot the 8th victim in the first Tesla. He then moved to the second Tesla, where he killed 66-year-old Dale Schultz and wounded his passenger, the 10th victim. From the charging station, he moved through the parking lot toward the Twin Falls Visitors Center. People inside saw him coming. They evacuated, but 3 people couldn't get out in time. They sheltered in place inside as the gunman walked through the doors. He walked back out, and there, waiting for him, was a brave employee from a nearby store. This employee confronted the shooter, distracting him, buying precious seconds for the others to escape. The suspect fired at the employee as he ran away, but the employee survived. The first responding officers were finally arriving on scene. The off-duty ISP trooper, still in the middle of the chaos, directed the arriving officers toward the gunman. The killer was moving fast. Drive-through. Street, charging station, visitors center. He was covering hundreds of yards in minutes, and as he headed for the walking trail, the final act of this tragedy began to unfold. When the shooting started, employees from the nearby stores, including a Dick's Sporting Goods, did what they were trained to do. They fled. They ran out the back doors, away from the glass, away from the parking lot, and onto a nearby walking trail. They thought the gunman was still in the front parking lot. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. The gunman exited the visitor's center and proceeded directly to the trail. He was heading straight for the fleeing employees. According to the police video, Williams came across 2 people on that trail. One of them was Braxton Steube. Braxton didn't have a weapon. He didn't have backup. He was standing on a dirt path, face to face with a man who had just killed 3 people and wounded 7 others. And in that fraction of a second, Braxton made a decision that defies every instinct of self-preservation. He put his hands in the air, and he started talking. Braxton later spoke to KMV-TV about what he said in those terrifying seconds. He looked at the gunman and said, "I have a family." He said, "You don't have to do this. I'll tell you whatever you want. I'll do anything." Listen to the psychology of that moment. Braxton didn't scream. He didn't attack. He didn't beg for his own life in a way that would trigger the shooter's panic. He appealed to the shooter's humanity. He offered himself as a shield. He gave the gunman a choice. And according to Braxton, the gunman reacted. Williams seemed to tear up. The violence paused. The monster hesitated, and then Williams said to him, "Just get away from me, man." Williams shot at Braxton. He missed. And then, as police sirens grew louder in the distance, as the perimeter closed in, Chad Williams turned away from the trail and ran up the path toward the canyon edge. Chief Matthew Hicks stood at the podium and addressed Braxton directly. "To that young man, you are a hero," Hicks said. "Your courage, your composure, your selflessness, in that moment, likely gave others the time they needed to escape harm. This community is grateful for you, and we will never forget what you did that day." An unarmed civilian, a former cop, an off-duty trooper, an armed citizen, a woman who picked up a jammed gun, an employee at the visitors center. 6 people who refused to be victims. 6 people who disrupted the timeline of a massacre. But while the heroism is clear, the investigation is just beginning, and there are massive questions that law enforcement still has to answer. As Braxton Stube separated from the gunman, Williams ran up the path. Officers were close behind. Body camera video picks up the chase. Officers are pursuing the suspect up the trail, searching the pathway, the construction site, and the canyon edge. And here is a detail from the police report that changes how we view the final moments. While the officers were chasing Williams, they were receiving reports of a possible second gunman. Imagine the pressure on those first responders. They are running up a canyon trail, hearing gunfire, knowing 3 people are dead and 7 are wounded, and dispatch is telling them there might be another shooter in the area. They cleared the construction site. They cleared the Petco area. And then, an officer located the gunman off the trail, near the canyon edge. The body cam captures the officer's voice. "Hey, show me your hands." As the officer challenged him, Chad Williams turned the gun on himself. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound and fell into the canyon. The officers immediately began investigating the claims of a second gunman. There was no second gunman. It was just one man, moving so fast, creating so much chaos, that the system thought it was facing multiple threats. We know who did this. We know how it ended. We know who stopped him. But we do not know why. As of tonight, investigators still do not have a motive for the shooting. Chad Williams was 24. He had ties to the area. He had attended the local community college. He had lived in Arizona. But what triggered this? Why a brand new in and out? Why a random Saturday afternoon? Why target strangers in a drive-thru? When a shooter takes his own life, he takes the motive with him, and that leaves investigators with a forensic puzzle. They have the 9.5-minute video package. They have the shell casings across the parking lot, the road, and the charging station. They have the digital footprint of his phone, his vehicle, his movements in the days leading up to August 1st. They are combing through his history, looking for the spark. But there is another question hanging over this case, a question about the timeline of the response. Chief Hicks praised the first responders. He noted that from the time the first call came in at 2:29 p.m., the first officer was on scene within 3 minutes. 3 minutes is an exceptional response time. In most active shooter events, law enforcement aims for a sub-4-minute arrival. Twin Falls PD beat the clock, but the violence was faster. Williams moved from the drive-thru to the parking lot, to the road, to the charging station, to the visitors center, to the trail, to the canyon. He covered a massive amount of ground in less than 10 minutes. By the time the first cruiser pulled up, the shooter was already moving away from the initial point of contact. This is not a criticism of the police. The officers who arrived in 3 minutes ran into a chaotic, multi-vector active shooter event where civilians were already engaging the suspect. They did exactly what they are trained to do, but it highlights a terrifying reality of modern mass violence. The event is often over before the cavalry arrives. The survival of the people in that parking lot did not depend on the police response time. It depended on Austin James running toward the gunfire. It depended on the off-duty trooper in the booth. It depended on the armed citizen at the red light. It depended on the employee at the visitors center. And it depended on Braxton Stube putting his hands in the air. The system responded in 3 minutes. But the heroes responded in 0.
People down.
This morning, we're hearing from the man who fired back.
It was like a switch, like, okay,
green light.
He said it's real now.
Yeah, like this is real, it's happening.
35-year-old Jordan Salinas tells me he and his girlfriend Emily had just pulled into the parking lot when the shooting began.
As soon as we pulled in, just a sea of people just flooding out of the building.
Yeah, we didn't know what was going on. We both thought it might have been a kitchen fire.
What's happening? What happened? What's happening?
Shoot.
As hundreds ran for their lives through that crowded shopping center,
Everybody's running.
Jordan drew his semi-automatic pistol and went toward the danger, seen on video repeatedly firing at the shooter.
You were actively taking cover behind the in-and-out sign.
The biggest thing was just that he didn't know where I was. When those first shots broke at him, I mean, he had no idea.
You had said he didn't like the bullets going both ways.
No, he seemed unusually comfortable aiming that rifle at those cars. And then as soon as some rounds started coming at him, everything changed.
So here is what we are watching next. Door 1, the motive investigation. The FBI, the ATF, the Idaho State Police, and the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office are assisting local authorities. They are tearing apart Chad Williams' life. Every text message, every search history, every financial transaction, somewhere in that digital debris, there is a reason, and when they find it, we will be here to break it down. Door 2, the operational review. Twin Falls PD will conduct a full after-action review of the response. How did the communication hold up? How did the multi-agency coordination work when the shooter moved across the highway and into the canyon? How did the second gunman reports impact the final pursuit? These reviews are standard, but they are vital for the next time. Door 3, the community recovery. Twin Falls is a city of 50,000 people. This was the first mass shooting in its history. The trauma of this event will echo for generations. The funerals for Ashley, Dale, and Christopher are being planned. The survivors, the 7 wounded, the dozens who hid in the bathrooms and the freezers, are beginning the long road of physical and psychological healing. If you have information regarding Chad Williams, his background, or his activities in the days leading up to August 1st, the FBI and Twin Falls Police Department are actively seeking tips. You can contact the Twin Falls Police Department tip line or submit information through the FBI's national type line. We will be here when the motive is uncovered. We will be here when the operational review is published, and we will be here to make sure the names of Ashley Garibay, Dale Schultz, and Christopher Claunch are never forgotten. Subscribe to ColdCase Watch Central and turn on notifications. Leave one comment below. What stands out to you the most about this timeline? The 3-minute police response, the off-duty troopers' return fire, or Braxton Stewie's confrontation on the trail? Because this community is still healing, and the least we can do is keep paying attention. But tonight, the last word does not belong to the gunman. It belongs to the young man who stood in his way. The man who looked evil in the eye and said, "You don't have to do this. I have a family. You don't have to do this. I'll tell you whatever you want. I'll do anything.